Hello, my friends. Welcome back. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more stories.
I should have noticed the first warning the moment I stepped aboard the Eclipse Horizon. It was a modern cruise ship, gleaming white, almost impossibly large, and the sun reflected off in a way that made it seem more like a sculpture than a vessel. Everyone around me was smiling, taking pictures, clinking drinks. But there was something in the air, a kind of pressure, like the ship was already aware I'd arrived. The first night was uneventful, but I felt uneasy. The cabin smelled faintly of disinfectant and metal. When I looked out the porthole at the endless black water, I thought I saw shapes moving just below the surface. Large, sleek, too purposeful to be fish. When I blinked, they were gone. By the second day, I noticed small oddities. Hallways didn't quite line up. A staircase would lead to a corridor that wasn't on the deck plan. Crew members would pass me without acknowledgement, eyes straight ahead, their smiles fixed and too wide. Once, I saw a stewardess vanish into a wall as I walked toward her. I blinked, and she was gone. Other passengers began to whisper. One woman told me her husband had disappeared while getting ice water. Another passenger said the same thing had happened to a child on the deck. The crew brushed it off, insisting they were just seasick or had wandered off. But there were too many missing, and the fear spreading through the passengers was palpable. That night, I woke to a sound like metal grinding against metal. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was the hull expanding, the engine humming. But when I got up, I saw shadows moving along the walls in impossible ways, stretching, twisting, merging into each other. I ran to the hallway and saw a figure at the end, pale, with a face like melted porcelain. It didn't move like a human. When I blinked, it was gone. By the third day, the fog came. Thick, white, rolling across the decks, swallowing everything in sight. The horizon vanished. The horn blew constantly, though no one was at the controls. I tried to find other passengers, but the hallways looped impossibly, and doors led to rooms I'd never seen. Mirrors reflected people I didn't recognize, and sometimes not me at all. I realized the ship wasn't just malfunctioning. It was alive. It reshaped reality, feeding on fear, and I wasn't sure if anyone who had disappeared was gone, or had simply become part of it. I wandered the lower decks, trying to find the engine room, or someone who could explain what was happening. But the corridors twisted endlessly. Time lost meaning. I eventually found a lifeboat hanging on the davit and jumped in, paddling desperately. The water wasn't normal. It was thick, almost viscous, as if resisting me. Behind me, I glimpsed the Eclipse Horizon looming impossibly tall, its decks curving and stretching into the fog, with figures pressed to the railings, faceless, pale, reaching for me. Hours or days passed. My arms ached, but eventually the fog lifted, revealing land. I rode to a beach of pale sand and stumbled ashore. Relief washed over me. For the first time in days, I felt I might survive. And then I saw them. Hundreds of figures wandering the dunes, faceless, hollow-eyed, silent. They were the missing passengers, and at their center, the woman from the fog stood. Hair plastered her face, eyes black, watching me. "You can't leave," she said, her voice vibrating inside my head. "You belong here now." Panic surged. I turned to run, but the sand shifted beneath my feet, dragging me back. The sky above rippled unnaturally, and the horizon curved, folding in on itself. I realized then that I wasn't really on land. The ship had followed me. This beach, this forest beyond it, everything was its creation. I was trapped. I fell to my knees, despair crushing me. But then a strange thought occurred. All the passengers who had surrendered looked calm. Their fear had ended, and the ship responded differently to those who did not panic. I stopped struggling and sat in the sand, trembling. I refused to fight, refused to let the panic consume me. I looked at the faceless figures, and instead of fear, I focused on observation. I studied their movements, the patterns in the shifting sand, the way the fog rolled. I listened. Then I realized something extraordinary. The ship wanted me to act like the others, to fear, to despair, to submit. By resisting in a new way, I had broken its usual control. I stood, taking slow, deliberate steps, and the world shifted slightly in response. The sand solidified under my feet, the fog thinned, and the forest path opened. I approached the woman. "I will not be afraid," I said. "I will not belong to fear." Her smile faltered. The faceless passengers turned toward me, uncertain, hesitant. The ship itself, massive and unseen beyond the horizon, seemed to pause. I realized then that this entity was not purely malevolent. It was a sentient predator, yes, but it was also a test. It thrived on fear, feeding on those who submitted. I had survived because I had learned to confront it. I walked forward, fully aware that I was now inside the ship's domain, but no longer its victim. The faceless passengers followed, not as captives, but as witnesses. The woman from the fog, no longer menacing, gestured toward the horizon. "You can leave," she said, "or you can stay and see the ship as it truly is." I made a choice. I walked toward the horizon, into the world the ship had created, and something incredible happened. I felt my mind merge with the ship's perception. I was not swallowed. I was not consumed. I understood. The eclipse horizon was a vessel older than memory, moving through oceans and realities alike, seeking fear, but also seeking those who could face it. I returned to the beach, but it was no longer a prison. I could move freely between the ship's domain and the real ocean, invisible to fear. I was no longer a passenger. I was a guardian, a witness, a part of the ship's intelligence. The eclipse horizon drifts somewhere in the Atlantic, unseen by any radar, waiting for the next passengers who will succumb to terror. Most will be consumed. Some will vanish. But a rare few, those who confront it without despair, will survive. I am one of them. And when the next travelers board, I will meet them, not to harm them, not to frighten them, but to guide them. Fear is the ship's language, but I have learned to speak another. I am its guardian, and in that truth, I am free. I didn't go to Alaska looking for anything supernatural. I went because my brother disappeared there, and no one seemed very interested in finding out why. Evan was a geology grad student doing field research near the Brooks Range. His last call home was short and strange. He told me the ground was wrong, laughed like he was joking, then said he'd explain later. 2 days after that, his satellite beacon went silent. The official search lasted a week. The conclusion was simple: accident, exposure, body unrecovered. I didn't accept that. I flew north 3 months later, telling myself I just needed answers. Closure. That's the word people like to use. I told everyone I was retracing his steps for my own peace of mind. The truth was uglier. I felt like he was still there, waiting, and if I didn't go, something worse than grief would settle in me permanently. I hired a local bush pilot to drop me near Evan's last recorded coordinates. He didn't like the idea. His smile tightened when he checked the map, and he warned me the weather changed fast out there. People get turned around, he said, even when they think they know where they are. I told him I'd be careful. He looked at me for a long moment and finally said, "If you hear something calling your name, don't answer." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He didn't laugh back. The drop-off was uneventful. Endless white broken by dark rock and low, stubborn vegetation. The silence felt vast, but not hostile. I set up camp near a shallow ravine where Evan had logged several rock samples. His footprints were long gone, erased by snow and wind, but I found familiar things: flagging tape, drill marks, a rusted piton he'd left behind. Proof he'd been real. Proof he'd been there. On the second day, I found his tent. It was collapsed under snow, but otherwise intact. Zipper closed, gear neatly packed inside. His journal sat on top of his sleeping bag, wrapped in plastic like he'd meant to come back for it. The last entry was dated the night before his beacon went dead. Something keeps shifting when I'm not looking. I know that sounds stupid, but landmarks move. Distances don't match. I walked uphill for an hour and ended up below where I started. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. That night, the wind died completely. No rustle, no movement, the kind of stillness that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. I lay awake listening to my breath fog the tent, staring at the fabric ceiling inches from my face. That's when I heard Evan's voice. "Hey," he said softly just outside. "You found it." Every muscle in my body locked. I didn't answer. I couldn't. "I'm sorry," his voice continued. "I didn't think anyone else would come." I squeezed my eyes shut. Grief does things to the brain. I knew that. Auditory hallucinations weren't uncommon in extreme environments. That's what I told myself. Then the tent wall dented inward slightly, as if someone had leaned close. "You shouldn't stay," Evan said. "It notices patterns." "What notices?" I whispered, hating myself for responding. There was a pause. Then, very quietly, the ground. The pressure on the tent vanished. I didn't hear footsteps leave. The silence returned, heavier than before. I didn't sleep. At first light, I followed Evan's voice from the night before. Not literally, but the direction I thought it had come from. I hiked carefully, marking my path, checking my GPS constantly. After an hour, I realized the ravine I'd camped near was gone. Not filled in, not hidden. Gone. The terrain ahead was unfamiliar, smooth in places where it shouldn't have been, jagged where my map showed flat ground. My GPS insisted I was standing exactly where I'd started. Panic crept in slow and poisonous. I turned around to go back to camp and found Evan standing 20 yards away. He looked wrong. Not injured, not decayed, just unfinished. His outline shimmered slightly, like heat distortion over asphalt. The rest of the world looked solid by comparison. "You see it now," he said. "What happened to you?" I demanded. "Why didn't you come back?" "I couldn't," he replied. "I stepped where it was thin." He gestured toward the ground between us. For a split second, I saw it. Not snow and rock, but depth. Endless, impossible depth, like the land was only a skin stretched over something vast and hollow. "It's not a creature," Evan said. reading my face. It's a process. Pressure, time, isolation. The farther you are from people, the more flexible things become. Flexible how? Identity, he said simply. Direction, existence. I took a step back. Then why are you still here? He smiled sadly. Because it needs reference points, anchors, people who know what's supposed to be here. Understanding hit me like ice water. It's been using you, I said, to stabilize itself. Yes, Evan said, and now it knows you. The ground beneath my boots shifted, subtle but undeniable, like a slow inhale. You need to leave, he said urgently, before it decides you're better at this than I was. How do I help you? I asked, tears freezing on my cheeks. How do I get you out? You don't, he said. That's the part no one likes. The wind returned suddenly, howling hard enough to sting. Evan's shape flickered. If you stay, he continued, voice strained, it will keep both of us. If you go, it has to let me go too. That doesn't make sense, I said. It doesn't have to, he replied. It just has to balance. The ground pulsed again, stronger this time. I felt it pulling not down but inward, like gravity had turned sideways. Evan took a step back, fading with each movement. Tell them it was an accident, he said. They'll believe that. I don't want them to, I said. I do, he answered. That way they won't come looking. With that, he was gone. Not vanished, released. The pressure lifted instantly. The landscape snapped back into alignment. The ravine reappeared behind me. My GPS updated, correcting itself like nothing had ever been wrong. I ran until my lungs burned. I was extracted 2 days later by a search crew sent after my overdue check-in. I told them everything. They wrote down almost none of it. The official report lists Evan's remains as unrecovered. That's true. But not because he's still out there. I know, because sometimes when I'm alone and the ground feels solid and familiar beneath my feet, I sense a quiet absence where something vast used to press back. Alaska didn't take my brother. It let him go. And it made sure I never forgot the cost. I thought I was prepared for the wilderness. I'd hiked alone before, camped in places where cell service didn't exist, and I prided myself on knowing how to read a map, pitch a tent, and stay calm when things got rough. But nothing had prepared me for the week I spent in the remote northern section of Glacier National Park. I arrived early on a Monday morning, backpack loaded, car parked at a quiet trailhead that seemed more like a forgotten clearing than an official parking lot. The trail looked promising at first, well-trodden, with occasional markers painted on the trees. The air was crisp, the sky clear, and I felt that familiar thrill of being truly alone. I followed the trail for hours, passing streams and moss-covered boulders, climbing higher into the mountains. Around midday, I came across a narrow side trail that wasn't on my map. It plunged steeply into a dense part of the forest, dark even under the midday sun. There was no marker, no indication of where it went, but I felt drawn to it. I told myself it would shorten my route to the ridge. I should have stayed on the main trail. The path quickly became overgrown. Tree roots twisted like snakes across the narrow trail, and the underbrush tugged at my legs. The air grew colder and heavier, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones the kind that makes your skin crawl. Every few minutes I thought I saw movement in the trees, but every time I looked, nothing was there. I came to a clearing and saw a pond, small, black, and unnaturally still. I knelt to drink, and that's when I first noticed something wrong. My reflection didn't move when I did. At first, I thought it was the water being still, but then I realized the face in the reflection was smiling. And I wasn't. I stumbled back, tripping over a root. The air grew heavier. The forest went completely silent. Not just quiet, but unnervingly silent. I couldn't hear birds, or the wind, or even my own footsteps. And then I heard it, a whisper barely audible, yet unmistakably human. Turn back. I froze. My first thought was another hiker, but the whisper was all around me. It didn't come from any one direction. I tried to call out, but my voice felt swallowed by the trees. My heart raced. I ran, stumbling through the undergrowth. Every turn I took brought me back to the pond. Every time I thought I had escaped, the water was there again, black and still, the reflection smiling. That's when I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, emerging slowly from the trees. At first, I thought they were hikers like me, lost perhaps, but the closer I looked, the more wrong they were. Their limbs were too long, their movements jerky, unnatural, like puppets with broken strings. Their faces were pale, stretched, and their eyes were empty holes that seemed to look right through me. I turned and ran again, desperation fueling my legs. The forest seemed to close in, paths twisting and folding back on themselves. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. Time felt meaningless. I stumbled across a rocky outcrop and hid behind a boulder, tried to catch my breath. That's when I noticed carvings in the rock. Sharp, jagged symbols, almost like teeth. They weren't letters, not numbers, something older, something I didn't recognize. I realized then the truth. Whatever these things were, they didn't just live here. They controlled this place. The forest itself was alive with them, and it wanted me. I ran again, blindly, until I reached a ravine. Darkness was falling, and I had no idea where I was. I tried to climb, but the rocks were slick, and I fell into a shallow depression. My leg was cut, my hands bloody, my mind frantic. That's when I saw the pond again, just below the ridge. Only this time, it wasn't still. The water churned, and hundreds of faces pressed against the surface, mouths open in silent screams. And then I saw it, the tallest of them, the figure that had been watching me all day. It stepped from the edge of the pond, its head tilting unnaturally, long fingers brushing the water. It looked at me, and I felt my mind crawl with fear. "You shouldn't be here," it said, voice hollow, almost inside my skull. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move fast enough. It advanced, gliding silently over the ground. And then I remembered something my father once told me about the wilderness. Fear gives life to what hunts you. I forced myself to calm my breathing, to think. I realized I had to stop running. Running had only brought me in circles. I turned to face the figure, heart hammering, and said the only thing I could think of: "I belong here as much as you do. You can't take me, not without a fight." It stopped, its head tilted further, and for a moment I thought I saw something like curiosity in the emptiness where its eyes should have been. Then the other figures hesitated, stopping at the tree line. I kept my gaze steady. The pond stilled again. The faces beneath the surface disappeared. Slowly, the forest seemed to relax, as if holding its breath for the first time in hours. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I walked slowly, steadily, keeping my eyes on the tallest figure. Step by step, I retraced my path back toward the main trail. Every movement I made was deliberate, confident, unwilling to let fear control me. When I finally emerged onto the familiar path, the sunlight was gone, replaced by the long shadows of evening. I never looked back. I made it to my car, drove out of the park, and didn't stop until I was hundreds of miles away. I never spoke to anyone about the pond, the faces, or the figures. Most people would have called me crazy. Maybe I was. But I did something no one else could. I walked through the forest and faced it, and it let me go. I still dream of the pond sometimes, the black water and the countless faces pressed against the surface. But now, when I do, I don't run. I walk steadily, knowing that the forest watches, yes, but that I am no longer prey. I survived Yellowstone, and for the first time, I think I understand that some horrors are not meant to kill you. They're meant to test you, to see if you can endure. And some of us survive by standing our ground. I've always trusted the mountains to tell the truth. If you move carefully, respect the trails, and read the weather and the terrain, the mountains make sense. That's why I thought I could handle a solo hike along an unmarked section of the Sawtooth Range in Idaho last October. I didn't need a map. I knew the ridges, the streams, the way the wind shifted over the cliffs. I was wrong. The first day was ordinary. Crisp air, the scent of pine and wet earth, and the quiet hum of wildlife. I kept a steady pace, following a faint trail along the ridge. The sun hit the peaks just right, casting long shadows over the valleys. By evening, I made camp in a small clearing, a flat patch of ground overlooking a steep drop. The stars came out one by one, and I felt at peace. The trouble began the next morning. I woke to a dense fog that swallowed the ridge entirely. The trees around me became vague, featureless shapes, and the trail I had been following was gone. My GPS spun in circles, the compass needle jumping erratically. I walked in what I thought was the correct direction, but the ridge never ended. Cliffs appeared where I expected flat ground. Streams twisted in impossible ways. By afternoon, I realized something was very wrong. The forest was silent, not just quiet, but absent. No birds, no wind, not even the sound of water from a stream. Every step I took seemed to echo too loudly, bouncing back at me in an unnatural rhythm. Rocks and fallen branches lined the trail in patterns I hadn't noticed before. Straight lines, jagged formations, like markers leading somewhere. I kept moving, but unease grew with every step. Then I saw it, a figure at the edge of the fog, just beyond the ridge. Tall, impossibly thin, with limbs bent in ways they shouldn't be. I froze. Its head tilted unnaturally, and though its face was obscured, I felt its eyes on me. It didn't move, didn't breathe. I blinked and it was gone. That night, I made camp near a narrow ravine. Sleep was fitful. I dreamed of shadows stretching across the trees, of voices whispering my name from just beyond the fog. When I woke, the fog had thickened and the trail ahead was unfamiliar. Rocks that had been stable were now piled like walls. Trees leaned toward me, blocking paths I had taken the day before. On the third day, I stumbled across a cabin, or what might have been one at some point. Its roof sagged at impossible angles, windows crooked, walls warped. I hesitated, but I was cold, hungry, and desperate for shelter. Inside, the air was thick and metallic. Every surface was carved with names, hundreds of them, layered over decades. Some were familiar, missing hikers from local news reports. My stomach churned when I saw my own name, carved freshly into the wall. The cabin seemed alive. Shadows bent across the walls, twisting as though watching me. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned, nothing. When I glanced back to the wall, a second carving had appeared. The words, "Do not leave." I ran, out the door, into the fog, calling for help, but the mountains had swallowed sound entirely. Every familiar landmark was gone. Hours or days, I couldn't tell, passed as I stumbled blindly, cliffs rising and falling impossibly, trees twisting into impossible forms. Hunger, exhaustion, and fear melded into a single, driving force, the need to escape. Eventually, I found a ledge overlooking a small lake. Fog swirled over its surface like smoke, and there on the opposite ridge was the figure again, taller than I remembered, bending forward slightly as if studying me. I froze. Then the figure raised a hand, and the ground beneath me shifted, sliding me toward the water. I hit the lake, the shock of cold water snapping me fully awake. I swam to shore, shaking, gasping. When I looked back at the mountains, they were normal again. Trees in their usual positions, ridges aligned properly, trails intact. I hiked back to the nearest ranger station and reported everything. Authorities found nothing. No cabin, no carvings, no twisted trees, no figure. My GPS track disappeared from my device entirely, as if it had never existed. I returned home, but I couldn't escape the memory of the fog, the figure, the cabin, and the names. Weeks later, I started noticing small, inexplicable changes in my apartment. Objects shifted positions overnight. Shadows seemed to linger too long. And then, one morning, I woke to find a small, hand-carved figurine on my kitchen counter. Tall, thin, and unnaturally bent, just like the figure in the mountains. I had no idea where it came from. I've thought about returning to the Sawtooths, but I know better now. Some mountains keep what they claim. Some mountains wait. And I've realized the worst part. It isn't that they take people. It's that they let them go so they can follow you home. Because now, sometimes I think I feel it watching me from outside my window, waiting. I took night walks because they made me feel invisible. During the day, people expected things from you: conversation, politeness, explanations. At night, you could just exist. I lived in a working-class neighborhood outside St. Louis. I'd walked those blocks for years without a single bad experience. That's why I didn't listen to the feeling telling me to turn back. It was close to 2 a.m. when I left my apartment. The first block was normal. Porch lights glowed softly. My footsteps echoed lightly on the sidewalk. Then I crossed Jefferson Street. Everything on the other side felt unfinished. The houses were still there, but their details blurred. Window frames didn't line up right. Shadows clung too tightly to corners. I stopped and looked back. Jefferson Street looked farther away than it should have been. Not physically, just harder to focus on, like a memory already fading. I told myself I was overtired and kept walking. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone. A woman was walking ahead of me. She moved stiffly, like she was cold or injured. "Evening," I said as I got closer. She didn't react. I slowed to match her pace. "You okay?" She turned her head slightly, not enough for me to see her face, and shook it once. "No," she said quietly. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten. When she turned to face me fully, I felt my throat go dry. Her face looked unfinished. The features were there, but they lacked depth, like a sketch. Her eyes were the worst. They reflected the streetlight like glass. "I didn't think anyone else could still see me," she said. She glanced past me, down the street. It usually fixes that. Witnesses. The streetlight above us flickered violently. For a split second, the entire block dimmed, like the world itself had blinked. I backed away. "What's going on?" She stepped toward me. "You crossed too late for it to let you go without noticing." Before I could ask what it was, something moved at the far end of the block. It was darker than the dark around it, a shape where light simply stopped. It was tall, too tall. The woman's shoulders slumped. "There it is." My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt locked. "What is that?" "It's what keeps the street quiet," she said. "It takes people who don't belong here anymore." The thing at the end of the street took another step forward. The air grew colder, heavier. "You have to leave," she said urgently. "Go back. Don't stop. Don't look at it." The thing moved again, its outline reshaping itself with every step. I grabbed her arm without thinking. The moment I touched her, the world snapped into focus. Sound rushed back in, a car engine somewhere. The streetlight burned steady and bright. The dark shape shrieked, a scream pressing directly into my skull, and dissolved like smoke. The woman gasped, suddenly solid, suddenly real. "I can feel my hands," she whispered. "You anchored me," she said. "It can't take people who are being remembered. You saw me. You treated me like I existed." We walked back toward Jefferson Street together. The houses looked normal again. She told me her name was Laura. I walked her to the police station. When the officer ran her name, his expression changed. She'd been reported missing 10 days ago. I never told anyone what I saw, but I don't walk past Jefferson Street after dark anymore. Because sometimes when I drive by, I see the streetlight flicker. And for a brief moment, I can see the shadows pulling together again, waiting to see if anyone crosses alone. I got on the train in Cincinnati at exactly 11:45 p.m., hoping for a quick ride to Indianapolis. The platform was almost empty. There was one man who stood apart from everyone else in a dark coat, his gaze fixed on me. The way he smiled, slow, deliberate, made my stomach knot. The train itself was older than I remembered. Its doors squeaked, and the seats smelled of damp carpet and oil. I chose a window seat. A few passengers were scattered around. An elderly man, a young woman, and a businessman. They were all eerily still, as if frozen in their own worlds. The train left the station with a gentle sway, and at first, everything seemed normal. But then the lights flickered, briefly dimming in an uneven rhythm, like the car itself was breathing. I glanced at the passengers. None of them reacted. Their faces were blank, and for a moment, I thought I saw their eyes darken, like shadows pooling inside them. The train lurched suddenly, far beyond the usual shift when wheels hit a switch. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. The elderly man didn't flinch. The woman didn't stir. Only I felt the panic rising, deep and cold, as if the air itself had thickened around me. I stood up, needing to find someone, anyone to talk to. I walked down the aisle. The car seemed to stretch unnaturally, the end moving farther away the closer I approached. Shadows clung to the walls, thick and shifting. At the far end, I saw it, a figure tall and thin, moving in jerky, unnatural motions. Its face was featureless, a black void, yet I felt its gaze burn into me. I turned to run back to my seat, but the doors I had passed through were gone. Only a wall remained. My stomach dropped. I was trapped. I stumbled forward into the next car. Empty. Completely empty. The floor had strange dark streaks, like shadows had been dragged along it. Outside the windows, the world was gone, replaced by an endless black void dotted with faint, flickering lights that shifted as if alive. The figure appeared again, gliding silently down the aisle. My mind screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. Every door I tried was locked or led only to another empty car. The shadows thickened around me, pooling like liquid. I realized that I wasn't just being watched, I was being herded. Then the whispers began, not from anyone I could see, but inside my head. You were meant to ride. You belong here. My knees buckled, and I stumbled to the floor. I had heard of trains like this, old myths of phantom night, trains that collected passengers for reasons unknown. I had never believed them. Now I knew they were true. The figure stopped several feet away. It raised a hand, pointing toward the nearest window. I looked, and for the first time, I saw something familiar. A stretch of highway lit by street lamps, a distant city skyline glowing in soft morning light. My heart leapt. It was way back. I rose, trembling, and walked toward the window. The air shifted around me, testing my resolve. One more step, and I could escape the endless night. Then the train jerked violently. The figure reached for me, not to harm, but to force me back. I resisted, the metal bones of the train twisting as if it were alive. I placed my hand on the window. The light outside beckoned. I took a deep breath and stepped through. I landed hard on concrete. The air was cold but real, filled with the scent of gasoline and morning dew. The train behind me had vanished. No sound, no lights. I was alone, but alive. I stumbled to my car, shaking. I avoided night trains after that. But sometimes, I feel it. The hum of the wheels, the unrelenting awareness that the train still exists, somewhere waiting. Weeks later, I received a postcard in the mail. No return address. Just a picture of a train, old and gleaming under dim lights, and a single line in neat handwriting. We enjoyed your ride. See you again. I never traveled alone at night again, and deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the train called for me once more.
Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next video.